NJ Brown writes, I have a drawer full of border strips and I keep forgetting to use them. I need to use them on every layout for a long time just to make a dent. Some are stickers, some have words or phrases, and some are cut into a design. Glitter Girl, can you help NJ Brown build bounteous borders?
Of course I can. Today I've selected all sorts of different border products for my stash. So I have some border stickers by Pebbles, some die-cut printed borders from Teresa Collins' Summer Stories collection, border stamps by Lawn Fawn, and then I've die-cut some border strips just with white cardstock and then painted it with Miss from Studio Calico and Heidi Swap. And these are from a two-piece cutting file that you can find in the shop, and it has all sorts of different arrows and triangles in a border pack. And then a roll of washi tape that I can use as a border in any width because it's just like a border sticker that never ends. So I hope that I can bring all those different border products together on one layout to show you a technique that will work with all sorts of different borders. Now with my paper today, I'm using this as my starting point for picking everything else, and it's this lovely stripe from Find Your Wings and Fly by My Mind's Eye, and I love both sides of this pattern paper. There are two patterns that use the same pink, but then one has it in a lighter shade as well. Well, the design I'm going to use with all these borders works on the rule of thirds and has 1/3 of one pattern and 2/3 of the page is another pattern. So that's perfect for pattern papers where you have two sides on the same paper that you like, but you only have one sheet, because you can get both patterns into a really balanced page with just one sheet of the pattern paper. So I am going to use a sheet of white cardstock for my border, since I'm going to be cutting this one into two pieces, and that will just make it easier to have that background. And I'm also going to use some journaling cards from this pattern paper by Jenny Boland Studio, the Modern Mercantile collection. Particularly loving this green, and there's also this gorgeous rich green on the back too. Now, this pink that appears throughout the Find Your Wings and Fly collection is a really rich corally pink. And at first I thought it was going to be hard to coordinate with other elements, and then I realized that the grapefruit pink from Lawn Fawn is a perfect match. The colors work really, really well together. It's as if they were the exact same shade. And so that's the Pink Lemonade paper collection. So there are more pattern papers with this particular collection that have that color, should you want to use those papers with a wider color scheme. That might be a collection that you want to look to, because the pinks are going to match really, really well. I'm going to be using this green paper from that set and then the letter stickers, because I want to stick with that pink and green color scheme. So I'm going to start by taking this pattern paper and cutting it so that I can have my 1/3 and 2/3, and then build everything on that background with all these different border elements. Now, in the simplest terms, using the rule of thirds means drawing an imaginary tic-tac-toe board across your page. So you have two horizontal and two vertical lines that divide the space into all those equal squares. With a 12-inch canvas, that means that this third of the page is going to be 4 inches wide, and then if you want to use 2/3 to balance that, that's going to be 8 inches wide. But because I'm using a little border around the edge, I'm going to take 1/4 inch off the width of both of those two pieces, and that creates my background that's divided into 1/3 and 2/3. And the same sort of technique can be used right in the center of the page, but the rule of thirds tends to be softer on the eye. If you turn to a page in your book and it's a centrally divided page where everything is right in the center, it tends to be something that really should be quite arresting when you turn to that page. It should be something that takes you by surprise, because designs that are right in the center actually grab our attention in a way that's not as soft as something that's on the third. So if you want to stick with a design that feels very natural and it flows well from page to page, using those 4-inch and 8-inch pieces can work really, really well. So now this gives me a great place to start working on all my border pieces. So I'm going to be building up a few different borders here on this vertical, then I'm going to place my photo over the top. And my photo is going to go right around here, so that it's intersecting another line on the rule of thirds. So I want her face to be just about 4 inches down from the top of the page, and that's going to give me the strongest placement of the photo, because it's still going to be soft, it's still going to be natural, but the place where your eye is going to go first is going to be right where her face is, so that you can see the lovely smiles of everyone in the picture. So I hope that's useful, and now I'm going to start with the different border pieces that are going to go on that and this line here. So I've pulled out all the different pieces that I have either picked from the die cut pack or cut out, and then I can start to build them. And I have some stickers as well, and I want to start with my stamps actually, because it will be easier if I stamp in the background and then add more pieces on top, and I can of course come back with the stamps and fill in a little bit of a gap here and there if I need to. So I'm going to start with these border stamps with the arrows and triangles. With my background stamps, I'm going to go from the most subtle color to the most obvious, and I want all of these to kind of fade into the background but provide a lovely bit of detail, because I'm going to be piling the paper on top of it. So I'm starting with the stamp that has the smallest pieces of the design, so that's the tiny little triangles, and I'm going to use the most subtle color. So I'm choosing a pink ink that I've used throughout this particular album, and it's also a pretty close match to the colors in these pattern papers, so it's not going to show up completely obviously at all. It's going to be a pretty small detail at this point, and that's fine. So just stamp that again. I don't need to worry about the middle joining up, because that's going to be covered by the photograph, so I don't need to try and stamp it 3 times and cover everything perfectly. I can just go ahead and make sure that it's going to be pretty much straight in a row from the top to the bottom. Then I'm going to move to the next border stamp and go to the next ink color. So moving from the most subtle to the most obvious, I'm going to go first to the green. That's a really pale color, but it is the other contrasting color here. Then the largest pattern of the stamp is in the most obvious color, and that's the dark brown. But same technique, and the most obvious one is going in the middle. So I have pink one side, green one side, and brown in the middle where they join. Now, this will look pretty messy at this point. It looks like a bunch of stamping without anything else. But I know that this is going to then give me a little bit of texture in the background, and that's what I want. So I'll just leave it be and try not to panic with the messiness at this stage. And then I start building my paper on top of all that stamping. Next comes all the paper elements, including the stickers. Some of these border strips have the same design on both sides, so this isn't straight on one edge, it's pointed on both and it's symmetrical. Whereas some border pieces will have a straight edge and then a shaped design on the other side. So I find it easiest to start with the pieces that have a straight edge, because they're the ones that you'll need to make a decision about which way you want things to face. These are going to look the same in either direction, pretty much, but this is going to make a difference whether I have the scallops on that side or on this side. And in this case, I want more weight toward the third of the page rather than the 2/3. So I'm going to run it right along the edge of the pink stripe here. And that straight line to the straight edge of the paper makes it really easy to line things up. Then the other patterns that I've picked out are all symmetrical. They're the same on both sides, so I can just start piecing them in and figuring out what's going to be best. So I'm thinking the next piece over can be this gold strip, and you'll see right away I'm starting to cover up the messiest part of all this stamping, which is why I wasn't too worried at first. But I have realized that this placement, where I add the gold over the top of the green, has just gotten rid of that lovely scalloped edge that I put facing that direction. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and change my mind and try the scallop facing the other way. Sometimes I'll find that actually is the good choice, and I prefer it that way, and sometimes it may be that means there's too much going on pointing in that direction, and I was better off with the straight edge and just covering up the scallop. So it doesn't really matter in the end. Pile a few more of these pieces on and see what I think. Most of these have straight edges, and then I get into the triangles. Now this isn't the way I'm going to place them, but I'm just looking at the balance of that scalloped piece with all the other pieces I've included. And actually, I'm not loving the scallops. I'm thinking that there's just too much emphasis on the straightness of the line and the triangles and the arrows. So I really love the color of this one, so I'm going to keep it where I had it before, even though that means I'm going to cover up the scalloped edge. And that's okay. I try not to worry too much about telling myself that I have to use this piece as a scallop because it's cut out as a scallop, and if I cover up the scallop, then I'm wasting the piece. The truth is that I have another way to cut a scalloped edge like that. I could always use a scallop border punch, and covering it up is not really a problem. If the color works and it's the right sort of pattern, then sometimes that can outweigh the weight of that scalloped edge. So don't worry too much about it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead with that, and this gold piece is obviously going to be pretty obvious to the eye. That's a pretty big expanse of all that glitter, so that's going to catch your attention a bit. And then I can overlap a little bit more. Now in this case, this piece is going to be too long, so I'm just going to cut it in the place where it's going to be covered up, because then I can overlap it and keep the nice little detail on the edge without having to try and cut it and make sure that both sides match up. It's just easier to cut in the middle and overlap it. So I can start at the bottom of the page and line it up here. What I'm hoping is that I can bridge the gap just perfectly between the pink stamping that I did at the very beginning and the gold. So that green sticker is now just going to show at the top and the bottom, but that's absolutely what I want. I want those little details in layering the borders. And I have one more plainer strip here. This one doesn't have any fancy edges, so I think I will just go ahead and cut that as a straight end and place it right over the top. So at this point I want to start adding my shaped border pieces that I've cut with my silhouette, but one thing I want to keep in mind is that it would be nice for some of these layers to go over the photo mat instead of all of them being underneath. So I've taken my photo mat that's cut from the 6x6 paper pad. That means that the photo is going to be offset just a little bit, so the photo is going to be slightly taller than the mat. And then I've taken two 3x4 cards, so they're both 3x4 in dimension, but I've layered them up so that I'm going to have this space for my journaling and this space to build maybe the title or the embellishment. And having one 3x4 card either side of a roughly 4x6 block is again a really nice balance because you're dealing with thirds and halves of the sizes. So I'm going to have those all as one piece before I place it on the page, and this way I can start building on top of this as well. So I could have all those little arrows come up over the top of the page, or on top of the photo mat, and then add my photo on top of that. So I can just start to see where I might want things to fall. I didn't want the feathers of this design, I wanted the green with the lines. So there's more design like this to this card, but it's mostly covered up. There's one feather that comes out to the side here, and I'm going to place something on top of it so that you'll never know that the feather was there. But I want to have all this space for my writing. So I'm going to start with the border strip there, but I know I'm going to have something else on top there. And I like this set of arrows here so that that's going to go over the green and come up to the top of the picture. So I'll go ahead and attach this green mat so that I can start layering on top of that as well as underneath. And with the strips, I just colored them with different spray mists, but I started at one end and the color is really concentrated at one end and then it fades out to white at the other end. So I want both strips to go in the same direction so that I have my concentrated color up at the top and the faded edge at the bottom. And I just made the same, I cut the same pieces at two different sizes. So I have that same green piece in a large one and a small one of the pink as well. And I think actually I'm not going to have all of these. I'm just going to snip the bottom two off. Definitely useful with the cutting files that you can then customize whatever size you want, so that you could have giant triangles and just use a small piece, or you can make it really small and have a tiny little detail there. And then if I start to look at where the photo is going to go, I would like something to come in here between the two. With the photo above this, I think that's a little bit nicer to have those details. I would like a little bit of something up here, so I'm just going to take a few of the smaller triangles and pop them up here. I was going to go so they're just coming up off the photo mat, but then I remembered the photo is taller, so I need to get this spacing right there so that you'll still be able to see it. And then I'll put the photo on top of that. So when I'm using the offset mat, I'm just looking at three pieces, three sides to get those borders even, and then I know it's going to run up off the top. My one last border element that I had brought out but haven't used in this grouping yet is some tape, and I'm going to just tuck that in on this other side. And of course I could have added this before, but I'm just adding it now because I wanted to have that balance of color, and this way I could see how much green was on the page before I added this in. I like to put the tape over the boulder patterns if possible, because the tape is going to let you see the pattern through its design. So you can see the stripes through here. And if it's a boulder pattern where there's not as much detail, it will be easier to see what's behind there, and it won't be too confusing. If the pattern underneath is really detailed and then it still shows through, it can sometimes just look a little bit too muddled. So something nice and clear like the stripe works well. So there we go, all those different kinds of borders, from stamps to stickers to die cuts purchased and die cuts cut on a machine, and some tape. So lots of different borders all in one place on a page. From here I'm going to add my title and my journaling, and then work in a bit of embellishment that's not on the vertical to add a little bit of variety to finish the page. Up to the very last finishing touches now. So I've added my journaling here and my title, and I'm not quite sure how that will show up on camera using the letter stickers that are a very good match to the color, but in person you can definitely see and read it. I'm hoping that you can read it on film as well. So then I've just added a little bit of horizontal element to try and counteract all this vertical. I don't want to eliminate it entirely, and I don't want to do anywhere near as much horizontal as I have vertical. I want it to be a real focal point of the page, that everything is there in this vertical line. So just a really small little element of horizontal, just this brown washi tape that repeats several times in that album. And then I've added three little enamel dots. Again, the middle color in the pink set is a good match to this collection as well. I think you could use all three shades really well, but I mean the middle shade is the closest to that color. And then I'm just adding really simple punch details here. So I repeat this punch shape throughout this album. So I've just done a pink circle in the background and then a green heart on top, and done the contrasting colors. So the lighter green over here with the dark green box, and the dark green on this side. So over here I wanted to cover up that little bit of feather that's left in the pattern. So I'll add my little heart here. So that also makes the two embellishments a little bit different. This one, the heart is stacked on top of the tape, and this one is separate. If you wanted to embellish more, you could add a larger embellishment here that brings the two together, or run the tape all the way across. But I actually wanted to do a little bit of tape that came in here and covered up a tiny little bit of ink on the edge where I got a little bit of the edge of the date stamp pad ink. So sometimes it's just useful to work around little things like that. And these letters are the same ones that I've been using throughout the album. So this is how I'm stretching out that alphabet, by just using it for a few words here and there in the title, so that hopefully I can get through most of that sheet. Now, this is where I'm going to stop with this particular page. However, I did want to point out one last thing you might want to keep in mind if you use this design, and that is if this open space, as you look at it right now, is calling to you and saying there's too much open space here, that's absolutely fine. You may have noticed that I only did 2 embellishments on the diagonal this time, and I normally tend to do a group of 3. Well, if you wanted to add something to this space, then you could easily bring in that tape and the heart motif and the enamel dots. Again, just repeat that same motif over here in the corner. You'd have more space to do it. You could just run a longer length of tape and place the embellishment here, and then that would give you a triangle that would balance things out if your feeling is that this is too much of the one pattern on show and not enough going on. However, I tend to think in wedding albums that a bit of open space is really great for the formality and makes it a little bit easier to focus on the photos, even though I want to use lots of embellishment. So I'm only going to do 2 today. Now, your challenge this week is to embrace borders in any way you want to. So border punches, border strips, borders that you cut with a machine, and border die cuts. Don't forget that a lot of the 12 by 12 sticker sheets now contain a few borders along the side. And I've added a list at the bottom of the page that has all different borders that are in stock at 2 Ps right now. So if you're viewing on YouTube, you can find that by clicking the link over to 2 Ps in a Bucket, and it'll take you to the list of all the supplies here, plus lots of other borders in the store. So I hope that you will use borders on your page this week and upload it to the gallery. Make sure you tick the box for the challenge and tell us how you use borders on your designs. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Join us next week for the continuing adventures of Glitter Girl and the ongoing mystery of the scrapbooker behind the mask at 2psinabucket.com.